Okay, welcome everyone to our forum today, featuring a very interesting book written by our own FIST member, Shannon Thrace, and I'm going to read her introduction. Shannon is a writer, cultural critic, and IT professional who lives for travel, good food, and summer music festivals. Her book, which we're going to be talking about today, 18 Months, a Memoir of a Marriage Lost to Gender Identity, tells the story of the dissolution of her 15-year marriage when her partner began to identify as transgender. And she's also a member of Feminists in Struggle. Shannon's book can be purchased through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other sources on the internet. And I understand that she's going to offer a special deal today. So you can go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate you having me on. So I would like for everybody to imagine a middle-aged man that I once knew. He was a man who was very outdoorsy. He enjoyed whiskey and barroom debates and hiking in state parks. And he wore long hair most of the time, but also a really large lumberjack style beard. And one time he told me that he was looking forward to growing old because when he had gray hair and a gray beard, it would give him a chance to play Santa at the mall. So, and then I want you to imagine this same man 18 months later. Did you imagine somebody who was 30 pounds lighter, who had a clean shaven face, shaved legs, shaved arms, wearing a wrap dress and heels? Somebody who was crying because he had been misgendered, somebody who'd been crying every day for a couple of weeks over incidents like this? I think probably not, unless you know my story and you guessed what was coming. But that man was my husband, and that woman is who he became. I'm Shannon Thrace. I'm what some people call a trans widow. And my story is, I think, unusual for some trans widows because I was initially very supportive of my ex-husband when he began his gender exploration. So I'm liberal. I was actually a very sexually adventurous woman. I had dated women in the past. I had experimented with polyamory. And so when my husband said that he wanted to cross-dress, and this was 14 years into our relationship, was the first I'd heard of it. I thought, that's no big deal. I thought, clothes are clothes. Women's clothes don't belong to women. People are free to express themselves however they see fit. And when he started, he actually had a really healthy attitude toward it as well. He said, I'm a man, I'm just expressing my feminine side. So I never really saw any problem with that. Of course, after a while, as you might guess, things got kind of weird. So months in to the cross-dressing, my now ex-husband became a completely different person. It really took very little time. He became obsessed with social media, obsessed with identity politics online. He was watching porn. He was easily offended and imagined oppression, especially when no oppression was happening. I was right there, and he would tell about events that just didn't happen. He was sad. He was depressed. He went on antidepressants. And the more that he seemed to pursue kind of a social transition, the more unhappy he got. And over time, of course, he wasn't just a cross-dresser. He began to say, first, I identify as a woman. And then when he said that, I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, clearly I'm not literally a woman. I'm just someone who wants to live in the world as a woman. So I thought, okay, that's, he's got he's in touch with reality. So this will be okay. Although, I was concerned. I wasn't sure where that was going to go. And then, of course, a few months later, he began to say, I'm literally a woman. one of the things that he began to do as he delved further and further into this gender exploration is he stopped working. He didn't renew his employment contract, and he stopped looking for work, and he stopped all of his hobbies. So his hobbies became like problematic for him because he was, as I said, he enjoyed hiking and outdoorsy things. Well, if he couldn't dress as a woman while doing those things, they made him feel dysphoric and he didn't want to do them anymore. So he really became essentially a different person, different looking, different behaving. He took on some mannerisms, some hair flipping, an elevation of his voice, and this sort of thing. And this is where, for me, first of all, I became less attracted to him because before he had been the same man I'd always known, but wearing some different clothes. Now he was starting to look like an actor, starting to look like someone who was just kind of putting on an image. And that was a turnoff for me. It was also very difficult to understand and difficult to reconcile. And when I tried to have conversations with him about it, he didn't want to talk about it. And he acted like he'd always been this way. And there was a dishonesty running through it. And it became very difficult for us to communicate like we once had. Some of the things that you've seen on social media that that activists are doing, he started to do. Like he would say, trans women are women, no debate, and it doesn't matter what I mean by that. And you're making me feel unsafe and I refuse to talk about this and those kinds of things. So our communication suffered. And as he became more and more interested in this persona, our sex life suffered as well because he didn't want to be intimate. He wanted to put on a show and put on an act and role play and all this sort of stuff that for me is fine on occasion, but not a replacement for human one-on-one contact and intimacy. And I think one of the most shocking things for me is the speed at which this occurred. And this is why I call my book 18 months. It was 18 months from the moment that he first said, I'd like to cross dress. And again, at that time, he had a pretty healthy attitude toward it, to the moment when our marriage completely imploded. There were all sorts of things that changed about him in such a short time. And I think that some of the influences on that were social media, pornography, identity politics, postmodernism, which at one point I would have said is an esoteric theory that nobody really subscribes to, but more and more I see how it's infiltrated identity politics and queer theory and all that sort of stuff, and how it's really it's being accepted more than you might imagine. People are comfortable accepting untruths and ambiguities and just really shutting down conversation and just kind of abandoning logic and reason and science and just abandoning human connection over a sort of really image-oriented, completely different kind of thing. So because this happened so fast, this is one of the reasons I want to talk about it. I think that it shows some things that are important to know in this debate. And one of those is that gender dysphoria, which my ex-husband did have, can be acquired. It's not just something that only, young gay boys have from the time they're 4 years old on up. It's something that I think is very similar, at least in my ex's case, to body dysmorphia. It's something you can cultivate in yourself. It happens in other situations. We know that anorexia and other kinds of body dysmorphia, and people who are addicted to plastic surgery, they cultivate that. They worry about themselves. They look in the mirror too much. This is something that people do, and this is something my ex-husband did as well. So I think it shows that. It also shows that not every person who believes they're trans is the same. So we know there's 12-year-old girls who want to be boys or want to be non-binary, and there's the gay men that Blanchard described, and then there's men like my ex-husband who are actually sexually motivated. So I think that's an important thing that I want to bring to light when I talk about this, because this movement is infiltrating schools, of course, and there's an ideology that's being repeated that's not 100% true, and it doesn't tell the whole story. And I just wonder how many parents would feel a little differently about their young girl who is saying she feels like a boy if they knew that the language and the materials and so forth are being created by men like my ex-husband, because he now works as a lobbyist for transgender interests. So, and another thing I think about is the fact that, my ex-husband was close to 40 years old. He had several successful relationships with women. He was very heterosexual leaning. He was successful in life. He had worked in IT. And if this captured him the way that it did, and captured him so quickly, and really just changed his personality, made him a completely different person. And he has had bottom surgery, which I think some people are surprised by as well, because there's a belief that the straight leaning men don't do that. If this captured him as quickly as it did, and as thoroughly, and changed his life, really upended it, then younger people really don't stand a chance. And so I really think that's when, we need to think twice when kids are saying they feel like the other gender, or they feel like whatever. If someone like my ex-husband, had confusion, then certainly children do too. And of course, we know of people like Jamie Shoup who have changed their mind again and again. So that's one reason why I want to talk about this, is just to hopefully just add my story to the conversation when policies are being made and stuff like that. I think that we need all kinds of voices. We need the voices of women whose children have announced that they're transgender. We need voices of scientists like Colin Wright and Heather Heying. We need the voices of people who present facts and figures, and we need the voice of the trans widow as well, because we were there, we saw what was up close and personal and intimate, and we have a perspective that isn't really getting told. So that's why I speak about this, and I'm going to be speaking at GenSpect in November. So I hope to bring some of those points to light. That is a conference that is a little bit more oriented toward the medical side, trying to present options and points of view, and trying to promote psychotherapy and things like that that are alternatives to the rushing children through transition. So I'm hoping my story will help with that conversation as well. And so I wrote my story in a memoir. This is what it looks like. It's called 18 Months. Right now, the ebook version of it is 99 cents through Sunday. And what I'm really hoping for with that sale is to get ratings and reviews. So if you do happen to read it and you like it, please leave an honest Amazon rating or review. That will help me get a higher ranking. That will help me get my story into the hands of more people. I'm currently working on a little bit of a press push. I have some things in the works that I think will be newsworthy and will maybe get me closer to editorial reviews and things like that. And that sort of thing all helps. So that's my story. I'd be happy to answer questions either about my book, my writing process, or about my ex-husband and what he was like and what that marriage was like.
Thank you, Shannon. Where do we get your book now? On Amazon? How do we
It
get
is,
access?
yeah, it's on Amazon. The 99-cent ebook is only on Amazon because it's an Amazon ebook, a Kindle book. The book is also available in hardback and paperback on Amazon and in bookstores. It may need to be ordered because, of course, bookstores order what they want and they don't all carry it. But yeah, it should be available in all the major bookstores now.
So, I think it's time for questions or comments. This is a very thought-provoking presentation. Maybe I'll kick it off unless somebody's got their hands raised. There, you have that little electronic hand you can see there, or you can just, this is a small group, we could just say stack or say you want to speak. But what do you think was going on with him that he made that he was vulnerable to this cult, basically, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do explore that in my memoir, and I think that it was really baffling to me actually until I began writing. And when I began writing, I started to see some pieces. One thing that I saw was that he has mental illness running in his family, and some of the reactions that he had and experiences that he had really resembled delusions of grandeur and delusions of persecution. So I think he may have been experiencing actual mental break with reality. I also think that he has a big ego and has been throughout his life very vulnerable to applause and praise. And there have been other incidences in which he kind of lost his mind over maybe someone being a fan of his work or something like that. There are just so many things going on with my ex-husband in particular. I mean, one of the things I talk about is that before the cross-dressing, long before, he had actually had a history of kind of trying on different personas. I mean, the core of his personality stayed the same. Otherwise, I wouldn't have, remained interested in him. But he would do he would go through phases with clothing. So he would dress as Hunter S. Thompson for a while, and he decided to dress kind of like a cowpunk alternative country guy, with Western shirts with embroidery on them and cowboy boots. And then he would wear like an emo look for a while, and he would do something like this for a year and then move on to another look. So this was very much in character with that. But yeah, there were a lot of things going on. There was a sexual motivation, of course, as well. And I sometimes think that men are very bad at managing their sexual experiences and urges. They don't necessarily always do a good job putting those in perspective. So I think that was very confusing for him as well. And that's how he processed it. So yeah, a lot of different things going on.
Some thoughts out there, questions, comments? Lynette, did you want to speak? You're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Shannon. First of all, thank you for today, coming out and talking to us, and also for writing your book. I read it, and you're a great writer, and your story is interesting, and it crosses a lot of channels, and I think you navigate that well in your book. I think the writing is just tremendous. I guess there were a number of sort of places in there that I couldn't connect all the dots, and I'm sure you lived it. And I don't know that you can, but it seemed to be that pornography played a big part in this. It seemed to be that, as you said, there was an acceptance kind of thing going on that you hear a lot these days, of diversity and inclusion and a need for that to happen. And you use the term acquired gender dysphoria, which fits into sort of all that. Is like some people see this and want to be that. I think maybe, I don't know, I wasn't there, but. And then also I just wonder if there's some sort of pain pleasure S&M, contact with this, and that people get confused about what's pain and what's pleasure. I have to confess, in reading your book, I learned more about sex than I did in the 76 years I've been alive. So, okay. So I learned some things. but I think, you know, you also use the term that he was sort of captured by this, and I think, you know, that was the thread through the book. He seemed to be enamored with himself
Mm,
and sort of a
mhm,
narcissist,
mhm.
and that sort of thing. And that may play throughout a lot of other people like him. I don't know. So I don't know. Just what was your gut feeling about the part that, say, pornography played in all of this?
Mhm. Yeah, I think you bring up some good points about sadomasochism and that kind of thing. Jamie looked at porn, looked at what he called tranny porn the first time that he cross-dressed, as you know from reading the book. And so that began this whole exploration. Um, Now I don't really have a good sense of how often Jamie looked at porn or what he looked at or anything like that because he was not. I have heard stories from other trans widows that it's just all over the computer and it's, you know, he's in the room forever. And I didn't have that experience. But knowing just how that first night went and how the role playing and other things started to go, I think that Jamie, like a lot of men, um, found female found the idea of a woman being dominated erotic. And I wonder sometimes if he felt guilty about that and if a way to continue to enjoy that image without feeling like the oppressor is to put yourself in the shoes of the oppressed. And so I know for a fact that being dominated, um, being called names, being whipped. This kind of thing is very, very common among these straight leaning, sexually motivated men who transition or who see themselves as trans women. I know that from Jamie and from other trans widows that, of course, I have networked with. And at the time while I was married, I belonged to a support group. It was a very, very common theme. And so you really can't ignore the, you know, it's not a coincidence, right? There is a belief that being a woman is being sexually dominated or being sexually available or even just being sexy. I mean, it's been pointed out, of course, that these men who say they're going to take on the female role, well, they don't take care of babies, right? They don't start hosting Thanksgiving. You know, that's not the part of the female role that they're interested in. You know, they become people who want to have passive sex. And so yeah, I think there is definitely a misogynistic um element and an inability to admit that. You know, I think that some people will say, yeah, you know, I'm interested in some problematic porn, but I know that's wrong and I feel bad about it. But this is, I think, just a real inability to put that into perspective and maybe some kind of internalizing of it and maybe some kind of strange alternative way to continue to enjoy that dynamic while not seeing yourself as a misogynist, oppressor male.
Hmm.
Oh,
Lori?
Yeah, so I wasn't even thinking about that. What you just said was very illuminating. Thank you for that point. It just kind of opened my mind to a greater understanding of what could be going on. And I know that power dynamics are in various ways at the root of some people's desire to identify as transgender. Um, that couple instances of that. I can talk about that later, but I just wanted to say it's not a question. I thought I read the book. By the way, it's on Kindle Unlimited right now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another
Right,
way people can access it.
right.
I didn't intend to read the book because have been shy, you know, just not wanting to read anything else about trans politics. It just wears me out. Mostly, I
Yes.
feel like there's nothing new to be said, or learned, and it just makes me mad, so I avoid it. However, I decided to read the book, and I'm really glad I did. And I read it on Kindle, which I hate to use generally. I've never read a whole book online before, but it was really well written. It just, was very compelling, and it had plenty of new perspectives in it from the, overexpressed points of view, and even just the fact that you started out to be so empathetic and understanding, and just typically, and this is not, to condemn you, but we are so trained to really put another person or group of people ahead of ourselves and our own needs and wants, and always defer to that you started out from that, and over the time it just continued to accelerate to where it was completely obliterating you as a person. And thank goodness that you came to a point where you said, I can't do this anymore. This is ridiculous. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the book, and I hope lots of people read it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I
And I'm
want
a
to say
picky
that.
reader.
Oh, thanks. I was going to say that I also am sick of trans politics, and I don't actually immerse myself in that very much for the same reasons as you. And in fact, sometimes people ask me what Jamie's doing now, and I really don't know because I don't watch his social media. And just once in a blue moon, somebody will bring something to my attention that he has said, and I'll know about it. But it's not something I want to see. It's exhausting and crazy, and it's just not something I immerse myself in anymore.
I had kind of a question about the connection between this kind of middle-aged man going to this kind of a crisis compared to the other crises that middle-aged men tend to get into, and just what's going on with men in this society that still obviously have power and privilege over women. However, it's not as absolute as it once was, perhaps, and they've also, lost, just as men and women have lost, working people have lost, status and standard of living, etc. But men, the expectation that men are supposed to do certain things, and now they can't really fulfill it as easily. And the crisis that, and like, for example, I have a brother-in-law who I believe I can't have my sister hear this, but I think went into that kind of a crisis, and was because he's a author, and he wasn't able to sell books, and so his role as leader of the family or whatever was jeopardized. And I really think that was what was going on. It's just a thought that I had, but I think that this is my sense is this is somewhat similar. It's another variation of this kind of despair because of a role that their identity was so caught up in this role, and the extent that it's modified or they don't have the same authority, that they don't know what to do. They get into crisis. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, actually. And there are a couple of things in that I would want to respond to. One is that Jamie was a musician. And of course, when he was younger, he had aspirations of being a rock star. And of course, that didn't happen, because that doesn't happen for the vast majority of people who play music. And I think you're really onto something there with this idea, which I have definitely had before, that Jamie came to a point in his life where he realized that dream wasn't going to come true. And it deflated him, and it made him feel, I think, like, I don't know if I want to say like a failure, but certainly like he thought he was going to do great things, and he didn't feel like he had done them. And I think Jamie was having a self-esteem issue with aging, and with that sort of thing, like, did I do great things or not? There were several indications that he was just having trouble with aging. So that's another thing I think is a part of this. Certainly hormone use in general, it can make people feel and look younger. And then just, the sort of obsession with image that he took on, and the obsession with being clean shaven, and, things like that. I see a real issue there with aging. And then as far as the midlife crisis, I've also definitely thought of that. And I did compare that in my book. I mean, I think that more was going on with Jamie than that, but certainly, I had a moment where I said, well, this is interesting. I have friends and relatives whose husbands abruptly left them in middle age, chased after the secretary in the Corvette, and, whatever. And mine has done this too, and it's a strange way to do it, right? But it's the same thing. I mean, did he look at me and say, well, she's aging, she's getting boring, what's next? Certainly I think there's a factor of that.
Lynette?
Yeah. Well, I guess, I appreciate your story. I know that there are other women who've had, similar circumstances in their life. And also we have to look at the women who are transitioning too, and somehow think that going to manland is better than being a woman. And you have to kind of scratch your head about that, what's going on there. I guess my question, and I listen to a lot of these things, is while it's interesting and everybody's got their own view of it, the global question is, so what? So what do we do? Do we just go, okay, it's happening, it'll blow over? Is there anything proactive to do? I think protesting doesn't get very far. I think writing books like yours maybe helps enlighten people, and certain enlightenment is a goal in life. But I've been listening to this stuff, and Anne and I and others have been working on this and many other things for, it seems like, a long, long time. And so what? So what do? We write letters, we make signs, we have seminars, we do this recording. Nothing changes.
Yeah. This is why I want to speak at GenSpect in November, because I agree with you. There are certain things where you start to go, wow, is this just futile? Because yeah, you can write letters and try to change legislation, but if people don't want that change, you're going to have a hard time doing that. And so for me, I think, well, a couple of things. One is that I care a lot more about whether or not children are led down this path than whether or not adults do it. I do not want adults to harm themselves and to make bad decisions and to be wrong about who they are, but I also can't help that. We do that all the time. And to some extent, if a grown adult is doing something like that, there's nothing we can do. But we certainly don't need to transition children. And not only are we doing that, but we are, my understanding is the schools are inviting children to ponder their gender and say which one they like. And one thing that I think is really disturbing about that is that when I was a child, I was a contrarian. And I remember one time just the teacher was like, okay, who's right-handed and who's left-handed? And I saw that left-handed was the minority. And even though I'm right-handed, I was like, I'm left-handed, because I just wanted to, I wanted to be different, and I did that kind of thing all the time. And so where is our tolerance for children who are just contrarian, right? Who are just saying what will get a rise out of someone? Not to mention, just so many other things. And so I really want to see the tide turn when it comes to the policies that we're implementing about medicalizing gender nonconformity in children. And Europe has turned the tide on that in several countries, and I'm hoping that we can do that too. And so the answer to me, and I think, I don't know, we need all kinds of voices and all kinds of ideas, but to me, I think that something needs to be changed in attitudes at a really basic level. And it's kind of a reiteration of Enlightenment values to me. It's the postmodernism that underlies this stuff, and the nihilism and the burn it all down. And, you know, that kind of stuff is really behind a bunch of this. And I hope that telling the truth is something that is timeless and that will resonate with people, and that people will, you know, go down these paths temporarily and then go, okay, wait a minute, I'm not telling the truth, and reality is rearing its head and I can't ignore it. And so I hope that people being braver, standing up, telling the truth, parents of kids, trans widows, teachers, medical professionals like Jamie Reed, what I hope is that just a continued pushing of the truth, you know, could help. I don't know. That's what I want to do. And I also think that writing persuasive stuff is good. It's just, I think, a need to change attitudes, and attitudes change very slowly, unfortunately. And that is actually a harder job than writing a letter or holding a sign. But that's what I plan to do. And I'm hoping that between what each of us brings to the table, we can help turn the tide a little.
Okay. Sandra, you had your hand up?
Yeah, may I speak?
Yes.
now?
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm late.
So I was,
Oh, go
Oh.
ahead.
Okay, so wait, Sandra first and then Lori, since Sandra hasn't spoken.
okay,
I'm sorry I'm late. I was doing a gender non-conforming activity and I got engrossed in it. But I'm not going to change my sex or attempt to change my sex. Something that I think about a lot in this whole mess is I was interviewing can't even remember his name. He's a sexologist, Ray something or other. And he called this believing that you're the opposite sex a mental disorder. And he called what the vast majority of men that he saw were men who were sexually turned on to having sex as a woman for whatever reason. And I think, Shannon, you've pointed out some of them that could possibly be the case. And I asked him if there was any other mental disorder that was treated by affirming the delusion. And he paused, put his head down, and said, no. The whole issue of men thinking that they have sexual rights to do whatever they want, and the whole way that they have made sex such a prominent part of their lives, or their what they consider their sexual needs. If those needs were real, I don't think they would need pornography to fire them. I don't think they need to change sex to fire them. I don't think they'd need to go through all of these permutations and combinations to enliven their libido. They're so far away from their natural being, I believe, that that the perversion of sex has become so predominant that it's driving so much of what is wrong with society today. In terms of what to do about it, and I've been away from reading about this for a few weeks, and I'm gradually getting back to being sane, but got a ways to go. And I am really tired of listening to the horror stories. I mean, I think that's useless for us to keep exchanging horror stories. I'm not saying that you shouldn't tell your story, Shannon, because I think that's really important, and I intend to read it because I want to learn more. But I'm being very careful and selective about what I'm reading, and I think, for somebody to take the time to write a whole book about their experience is going to be very enlightening. And it's not like watching tweets and memes and stuff and just bombarding yourself with desperation. And one of the things that I've done that makes me feel a little less hopeless is to work on people who have influence, big influence in their fields. I have a friend of about 50 years who was predominant in the gay rights struggle, and also he's an internationally acknowledged child welfare advocate. And when I first met with him, he spouted all the propaganda. I mean, he was just totally bought the whole trip. They're the most marginalized group, blah, 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 all the rest of it. And so it's taken me about a year to get him to actually look at this. And he happens to be a close friend of the lawyer that is going after Amy Hamm, the nurse that's about to lose her registration because she is gender critical. And I'm hoping that people like him, when they take this new information, are going to be able to influence people in high places, because he has access to people that I don't have. That's one thing I'm doing. The other thing that I'm doing is I've been podcasting with some American women, and the audience is kind of not in our bubble. And so I'm hoping that some of the information gets out to people who aren't even aware of the topic. And I'm also focusing on the other women's issues, because I'm going to do a series on prostitution abolition, because this is only one of the many backlashes against feminism. And I've been working a lot with people who are gender critical, and I'm alarmed at how right-wing this whole thing is going. And in Canada, I believe that we are going to elect a prime minister who's a lot like Harper, who was in power for 11 years and decimated any of the rights that we gained from the time of the Royal Commission on the Status of Women. So I think that protesting, like the biggest protest, this Million Children March that went on right now,
Right.
organized by the extreme right. So, and the voices of gender critical feminists get drowned in all of that. So these are issues that I struggle with a lot, and talk to as many people as I can about, because I'm alarmed by this sort of single issue organizing, and who's jumped on board with us.
So you're in
I'd like to
Canada?
hear your comments.
You're in Canada, is that right? What is your podcast?
An American Conversation.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out.
Okay, I think Lori was next.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about GenSpec. I don't know anything about it, but whether that includes psychiatry and psychology. And my comment is knowing a friend who is a licensed psychologist, and that she could lose her license if she expresses any gender critical views, and is very restricted in terms of what she can say to clients as a psychologist. And two things. One is, I missed the part about Jamie wanting to be a rock star, but same thing with what's his name, Charles Manson. That's what triggered his whole descent into really insanity, just about that. He imagined himself to be that, and when that didn't come true, he went into this whole cult thing. And also that when Jamie was having actual hallucinations about events that never happened, and just to really emphasize that that was just such a clear indication that there was really some mental illness going on, and the connections. So is GenSpec, are there psychiatrists and psychologists at it?
Yeah, there are, and she should, or your friend should totally check it out. they actually have an article out on their website about why it is not illegal to do exploratory therapy, and they explain why it's not. And I have to admit, I haven't read it really closely because I'm not a psychologist or anything, but it'd be worth checking out. They have some justifications for what the law actually really says and what you can say and what you can do. And their position is that you don't have to affirm and that you can do exploratory therapy. So yeah, they are an organization that arose, I believe, in response to the WPATH. And so I don't know if you've ever seen the podcast Gender: A Wider Lens, but it is hosted by two psychologists or psychotherapists. One is in Ireland and one is in the US. And they are a part of GenSpect. And I think it began in Europe with there's a WPATH. There's a WPATH for Europe and a WPATH for America. I'm not sure of all the acronyms, but what they did was when WPATH held its conference on transgender medicine, they held their own conference right next to it on alternatives, and they do that everywhere. So that they've done that every time there's been a conference, and there's that's the reason for the conference in Denver this fall. There's a WPATH conference in the same area, and they're having their own conference with alternatives. They're just kind of holding a space like this isn't the only view in town. Here we are doing this as well. So she should totally check into it. Or he, I didn't hear whether your psychologist friend is a male or female. Sorry about that. And I had a couple other comments too about things that both of you said. One was that that comment that I guess Ray Blanchard said that gender dysphoria is a mental illness, and it is a mental illness. Like, that's objectively true. It's in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses, and that is a very interesting fact that is a mental illness, and that if you say that online or in the public discourse, you'll be called a bigot and stuff like that. So it's a point that nobody seems to want to admit, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets taken out of there because of that. But it is interesting that it's a mental illness and that Jamie suffered from other mental illnesses. So, it's kind of like maybe they're comorbid, maybe this is not a healthy way of thinking. Yeah, I was thinking there was something else somebody said. Oh yeah, I know what I wanted to say too. In terms of what we can do, my partner has a pet peeve that she likes to go off about. This is probably why we get along so well. She is really big on talking to the people who are in your life. And so she has gotten on the case of a couple of her really good friends because they would not confront their brother or dad or someone who voted for Trump or someone who is transitioning their child or something like that. And they've, just kind of nodded and said, I don't want the stress of saying anything back. My partner's really big on, no, you should say something back. This is where you can have an influence. Actually, you're much more likely to have an influence on your sister or brother or friend than you are on a politician or something like that. And these are little opportunities that people shy away from because it's stressful and because they don't want the family strain or whatever. But I think that's a really good view too. And I certainly have always tried to do that too. I mean, the reason why Jamie and I are no longer together is because I wasn't willing to just sit there and not go, wait a minute, what about this? Are you really being honest? Are we really telling the truth? And so I do think that's a really good approach too, and just a way of changing minds slowly and in your own sphere of influence.
Yeah. Does anyone else have their hand up? I'll call it myself again. There's a couple things I wanted to say. One is you could say it's a mental illness, but it's in a certain social context. of, the crisis, as I said, that men are facing with this, we haven't achieved women's liberation, and so we're in a no person's land, and they're in worse than they are, but they're still in a crisis. And the sex roles are still there, and sex roles are still restrictive. And so the idea that if you don't conform, your body's wrong and you have to change your body is a very sexist, and homophobic idea. And that's gotten, dominance. So it's not simply a mental illness by itself. It's it's creating a certain social context. Then I had experience when I was in San Francisco and got COVID, but I went the last day. We had a protest, and I wrote my experience on the FIST website, so you can just check it out. We had 20 of us had a protest, and we were met by trans activists, as we were that whole weekend, and being called in the middle of San Francisco, which used to have all this lesbian stuff and all this pro-choice marches and all this feminist activity, and and real left-wing activity. These people were acting like they were left-wing and that we were the fascists. So it was very bizarre. This is so I called my article like a triple delusion: the delusion that they're men or women, the delusion that they're progressive, and then I'm a fascist. So this is a triple delusion, and a very, very dangerous. And the anger that they have, and that it's directed toward women. I mean, that's like should ring somebody's bell, male or female, who thinks that women have rights and shouldn't be subordinate. Should ring someone's bell. Why is the target women? Why has the target been lesbians from the beginning? I mean, what's this about? And so we were like drowned out, but I was like one of the speakers, and I was speaking. You're not progressive. This is not progressive. This is sexist and homophobic. And I think we have to start educating people about that, and also we need to be speaking out as feminists, as leftists, as progressives on this, because the far right is getting a field day, and and they shouldn't be the only ones speaking up about these atrocities. It's real important that feminist messaging be heard. And that's a whole another forum that we'll have to do about that. But it was just I hadn't actually faced. I was called fascist online and Nazi online as promoter of genocide, and obviously I was harassed on my job for being a bigot and a hater, and fired from my job. But that was all remote. It was all on emails. This was the first time I had him in my face, and having him say, millions of dead TERFs on their signs, along with an abortion rights sign. I mean, like, the level of delusion is amazing, but I just think it's really important we confront that. And this is really not progressive. This is reactionary. It's sexist. These people are very deluded, and then they're using these men, really, these trans-identified males, are the ones pushing the child thing in order to affirm themselves further, and that is an atrocity. And so that we have to speak out about that. We have to fight that. So because that's really
I mean, I think one of the problems is that women and feminists are speaking out, but they're not really getting the platform. And then, of course, if they speak to conservatives, that's a whole nother, PR problem. So it's very difficult to get a platform. I mean, I know that from like just trying to get editorial reviews and stuff like that. I've actually had agents and journalists say to me, I love your story. I think it's really important, but I can't find it a home. So,
right. Tina, you're on mute.
Yes. Okay. Really interesting topic. I am in the same place as several other women who said, you know what, I've stepped away from this for a little while. It's just too depressing. But your story is fascinating. And your level of observation is wonderful. I wanted to ask something more specific, though, and that was to the woman who talked about the March for Million Children, because my little group in salon in Chicago was looking at the list of endorsers they planned an American march or an American day for actions. And we were looking at the list of sponsors. It's mainly aimed at opposing affirmative surgery and therapy. But we were looking at what were the experiences, what did you see about the Canadian March? Were there any voices in the wilderness that were actually gender critical, but not completely co-opted by the conservative organizations there? And in Pennsylvania, a high school student protest caused the school to change its curriculum.
Right.
That's it. That's all.
Did
That sounded like it was-
did Sandra want to respond to that,
yeah.
or anyone else?
Yeah, I was actually out of the country when the march happened, so I wasn't there for it. But I've taken a look at the groups that were organizing it, and they're not conservative, they're extreme right. They're extreme right wing. They're the convoy boys, and unfortunately, there's a lot of women who are gender critical, who are very politically naive. And they're leaders in the fight. I'm thinking of Heather Mason, who's doing a great job organizing against the men in prisons, because she was in prison and she has contacts with women in prison. So she comes from a really valid and authentic place on this issue. On the rest of the issues, it's like, she supports the convoy. She got lots of support from the extreme right again. They come out to all of the demonstrations. And I don't know what the solution is. All I'm saying is that my fear is that we're going to lose even more if we're not really careful.
Tina, did you have your hand up again? Did you want to say? And you're on mute. Can't hear you. You're on mute.
No, I forgot. I didn't take it down. I'll do that now. Yes, you're right. Not conservative. That means something different. Extreme right is the folks we got here too. Right. And how to
it's not easy.
find. I'm convinced over and over that finding the connections. So you bring in the crew that says lesbian, not queer, who are gays and lesbians, who are women who stand for women's rights, that are not just about demanding female spaces. That's the only route I see for undercutting this. But I'll go read your article in about people who are trans crazy and support abortion rights. Like the they're dizzying. They make me. They give me they make me dizzy. Stop there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We are gonna. I'm thinking about putting together a forum on the issue of well, I've done it on child transition, but these particular efforts right now in schools are related to schools, including there's an effort to put initiatives on the ballot in California. So I think we need to discuss this stuff. And I think the biggest problem I have with these right-wing groups is they throw in or they throw out the baby with the bathwater, like no sex education. You can't mention gays in schools. I mean, that's really the problem. There's a woman named Carol what's her last name? I can't pronounce it, but she's been working at Denzero, I think, who's working in Seattle, and she had a petition to Seattle, which was good on the issues. It really was very, pro-gay, and I mean, it was very good. So I think if we can unite people around a decent platform that includes those things, then you don't have as much a problem. I guess if those other issues are thrown in and they do want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, what would I do? Probably go there and flyer. but if they didn't do that and it was something I could support the message, then I'd probably want to be there with my feminist message and possibly support it. So it's just a really complicated situation, very, very complicated and specific, and it really is a problem. I mean, they really are some really extreme right-wing groups. But if they shouldn't be the only people talking about the mutilation of kids. I mean, they got to hear feminist voices and progressive and left-wing voices. But anyway, that'll be another forum that I'm hoping to put together. That FIST will be putting together soon if I can reach Carol to get that moving. So any other comments about the book? We're getting a little far afield, but it's also connected. Sandra, did you want to say something? You're on mute. Get on mute.
I was going far afield, so I'll take my hand down.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean,
I don't really mind going afield.
it's okay. We have a little, we have a little time. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is that Linda Blade, who is leading, done an amazing organizing job about women in sports. And I have a personal relationship with her. When I first started meeting with her, I didn't know that she was a big player in the Conservative Party in Canada. I don't have anything. We've had some great conservative prime ministers in Canada, just like you've had some good Republicans. But the parties, those parties have been captured by the extreme right. And that's certainly true of the Conservative Party in Canada. And there's even a new party now that's even more, it's libertarian. So it sounds progressive in places, but it's not. But anyway, Linda Braid is the Canadian representative for the WDI, Women's Declaration International. As I say, I keep in conversation with these women because I keep expressing my concerns about what's going to happen for women if the extreme right wing gets power over this issue. Linda has just managed to get the Conservative Party in Canada to support a couple of really good policies about children and about men in sports. The other parties won't even have a conversation.
I know.
So, as I say, I would love it to have a really good, long, thoughtful figuring all of this out, because it's a minefield out there. And the problem is that there are subtleties. We're against what they're teaching in schools, but we're not against teaching about gay people or
Exactly.
anything like that, right?
Exactly.
And the gray is gone. Everything is black and white now. You're either for or against, and that's it. It's regressive. It's authoritarian. The left is acting more like the extreme right than they are like progressives.
There's no real left is the problem. I just wanted to say that myself and Fran Luck were on a panel at the WDI conference in San Francisco on the issue of working with the right. Fran and I have slightly different views, but also disagree with many points from Wolf and WDI. So, and then Thistle Peterson had us on their Women's Liberation Radio News little podcast thing to have another discussion on this issue. So we had that just happened last week. That'll probably be posted, I think, on the WLRN website. So and our panel from the WDI conference will probably, I assume it was taped, I assume it will be posted as well. So this is a very complicated conversation. I think we need to, have it, and we need to know there's going to be like a range of views on how to handle it. But I think there does need to be a group of people feminists who at least recognize there's issues here. There are problems. we're not going to get saved by anybody, and there's not going to be saved by, in the United States, Democrats or Republicans, in my opinion, and we're not going to be saved by anybody. But we have to recognize there is some issues with the far right that are concerning too, and then the complete default of what's considered the left, which, in my opinion, doesn't even exist. Basically, we're in a difficult, very, very difficult situation. So that discussion may continue, and hopefully in the forum I'm going to have, but I really recommend looking at that stuff and reading the takes on reading our report on the WDI conference. I was glad to be there, wasn't glad to get COVID, but I was glad to be there. We're all in the same movement, and we're grappling with this stuff. And we do have different perspectives that need to be discussed and debated. And that was really nice that there was a debate. That's really, really nice Kara Dansky invited me to participate, and she was just moderating, but it was good to, actually discuss this, and hopefully we'll have debates on other issues that are important. For example, the Equal Rights Amendment, where FIST and the rest of the new radical feminist movement have taken opposite positions. So that needs to be debated. And then, this particular discussion has to continue because it's very complicated. I did speak, let me just say, I did speak at a Our Duty rally that was very specifically focused on the issue of gender, so-called gender affirming care on kids, and presented the gathering as a nonpartisan gathering. I did speak and as openly as a lesbian, a socialist, feminist, and they posted my speech on the Our Duty website. So I don't feel bad about that, because I feel like the messaging was okay, and it presented itself as a nonpartisan event, even though there were, a lot of people I don't usually hang out with there. And there's the issue about the gays against groomers people, and they're like driving me up a wall. But anyway, so all this stuff I think we need to continue to discuss, and then understanding. I think that Shannon's book, I'm going to read it, but just from your presentation, raises really important issues about how, what this really means in real life, and how it's affecting, women involved with these men, and that's, that's really important. How is this affecting women? And I think it's an insight that, some of us aren't going to have, because we're not involved with anybody on that level. So I think it's really useful. Tina, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Looks like your screen's frozen. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, just looping back. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Maybe not. Okay. Just a question that actually ties up these two things. One group I came across was can't remember the name of the group or the woman who was the spokesperson, but there were a group of transitioners who did not want their message to be co-opted by the right wing here, the right wing, who said, we decided this was we made some really bad life decisions. We are talking about them now, but we're not going to chime in with.
Yeah, we know about those.
We need to shore up traditional sex stereotypes. And I wondered,
Yeah, I'm just saying,
I wondered, Shannon, if you said you were in touch with other women who had the experience with trans. Were there also detransitioners you came across who talked about it from their perspective?
You're talking about it at the WDI conference, or just generally with my contacts? I know about these people. I know about this group. I have some. I just felt that they were, from my view, just a little too rigid. But that's just my opinion. I think it's really important to have this conversation, and I'm hoping as we get FIST is working on our conference, it's going to be really different than WDI. It's going to be much more participatory. It was one of my my disappointments about WDIs, it was all presentations and very little discussion. I want like this kind of stuff, to have, real discussion. So we are gonna, organize a conference, late next spring. And we can start, really have some really interesting presentations and lots of interesting discussion and planning, being able to plan some kind of, activism around, not just, I mean, as FIST, we're interested not just in this issue, we're interested in abortion rights, we're interested in the ERA, I'm working locally with a couple of other people in and around FIST on ERA and abortion rights. So we're trying to make coalitions with liberal feminists, which isn't always easy because they kind of know where you are. And it wasn't, anyway, it's a long story, but we're trying to do that too. So which is really different from WDI, which is basically singularly focused. So anyway, we'll need a lot of ideas and support, and hope that everybody who's not a member of FIST here, to please join and help us. We now have we have a new structure that we're just starting, where everybody who joins is part of the decision-making body called the Feminist Assembly. And so we're not going to have the 2 levels of membership. We're just going to bring everybody in, and who joins, and they all can be part of it. And so anyway, I'm kind of making an announcement. I hope I'm but before I do, anyway, so I'm encouraging people to join FIST and to get involved and to be in this conference, because we're going to try to have more of this dialogue and much more participation and planning in our conference, and the WDI one that I just attended. So Shannon, did you want to wrap up? Is there anybody else who wants to say something before Shannon wraps up? Okay, do you want to wrap up, Shannon?
Sure. Yeah. I want to thank you guys for having me here. And I really enjoy having these conversations and just finding out women's ideas, on what we can do and how we can work together to just turn this thing around. I mean, like I said, I am really concerned about children. I've moved past my marriage. It's been quite a while, and I've built a life for myself. So for me, it's not really about dwelling in the past or feelings about my ex or anything of that nature. It's about exposing some of the delusion and unhealthiness and lies that are surrounding this movement, and just trying to get the truth out there. So I appreciate the chance to do that here. Thank you so much.
Right. Any other thoughts by anybody? Tina, did you have your hand up on purpose? I don't know. I guess it's
Still up.
not anymore. All right. Okay. Any other comments by anybody? Any other thoughts?
I just sent you a personal message, Shannon. I hope you check it out before we leave.
Great. Thank you.
And then, okay, yeah, I'm going to urge everybody who hasn't read the book to read it, and I will read it myself. I need a book now. I'm kind of out of books, so it's perfect timing to take on that book.
Thank you, Anne, for doing
yeah, well,
this.
thank you so much.
Thanks,
Okay.
FIST, and I hope you recover from COVID soon.
Yeah, I'm almost
and
there,
feel
but
better.
it lingers. It lingers a little bit here. It's been like 2.5 weeks.
Have a great rest of the weekend.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, and hope to see you on another Zoom call pretty soon.
Bye now.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.